All men have fallen into the friend zone at some point in their lives, and I know you're probably wondering why. Basically, it's because they haven't been able to generate enough sexual tension and haven't dared to sexualize. Does this sound familiar to you? Have you ever had trouble creating sexual tension? Well, don't worry, because I have 5 techniques that work 100%, plus an extra bonus to seal the deal and drive her completely crazy. Now you might be thinking, how can I be so sure that these techniques work 100%? The answer is simple. I'm a bit of a sociopath. I have no shame or fear, and I've tried all kinds of strategies. I know what works and what doesn't. I've sacrificed myself for you, bringing you everything you need and explaining it step by step so that you can go straight for it without any failures. Before we dive into the techniques, there's one concept you need to understand. The reason why you're not creating sexual tension is that you're playing it too safe. In other words, you're so afraid of rejection or humiliation that you're not willing to take risks. With that in mind, let's move on to the first technique. And technique number 1 is that you must adopt the attitude of the wolf. The wolf, when it's in front of the sheep, only has 2 options. 1, to eat the sheep, or 2, for the sheep to flee. But the wolf is not afraid of losing the sheep. It's not afraid of the sheep escaping. If it escapes, it will find another sheep. What it won't do is, out of fear of losing it, try to become its friend. It's the same with women. Either you get her or she rejects you. There's no middle ground. You gain nothing from being her friend. Women classify men into 2 types, those they consider a potentially sexual partner and those who are harmless, and they categorize them as just friends. Tattoo this into your mind. If she has already classified you as a friend, there's no going back. You won't be able to conquer her, and you're not interested in continuing to be her friend because she'll simply use you to ask for favors, to ask you to accompany her places. And worst of all, the greatest humiliation you can suffer is her using you to console herself and tell you that the man she's having sex with is ignoring her. The second technique, very important, is that you must be able to generate sexual tension through your nonverbal language. The key is that you must subcommunicate with your behavior, that you're a confident man, and that you're interested in her. It's the best option, because if you try to communicate your interest verbally, think that women have very inflated egos. They have a lot of options. They have a lot of guys chasing after them. Their Instagram is full of messages from men who are attracted to them. One of the most important things, apart from having relaxed body language, is eye contact. Look her in the eyes when you talk to her, and when you listen to her from time to time, break eye contact so as not to seem too intense, but always upwards or to the side. We never want to look down, because it shows submission. And a very powerful technique you can use is, from time to time, look at her mouth, look at her lips. This is something that women love and that excites them. You're demonstrating sexual interest through actions and not words. Let's move on to the third technique. And this one is important and more complex, so grab pen and paper and pay attention. The technique I'm going to explain now is a bit controversial because we're playing a bit with the girl's ego. But don't worry, don't feel guilty, because that's something women constantly do with men. To give you a bit of context, you have to know that women have an army of simps behind them, guys obsessed with pleasing them and always giving them reason. This is where we're going to differentiate ourselves. For example, tell her no more often. Let her see that you won't always agree with her. If you don't agree with her on something or don't feel like doing something she asks, simply tell her no. She has to perceive that you don't need her and that if there's something about her you don't like, you'll leave. They need to perceive you as a challenge, because otherwise they'll get bored. Contradict her more, for example. Imagine she tells you she loves a movie that you think is silly. Tell her you hate that movie, and that despite finding her attractive, you two have no future because you can't be with a girl with such bad taste. This way you can compliment her without losing value, because later on what you'll do is reject her. Basically, it's psychological manipulation that works. In addition, this way, they perceive you as a challenge, and that never fails with them. It's an attitude that starts to seek your validation. Hold on a moment. Stop for a moment. I know you're enjoying the video, but you need to know before we move on to the fourth technique that at the end of the video I have a very important question to ask you. I'm just saying this so, once you get there. And now let's move on to the fourth technique. The fourth technique is one of the ones I consider most important and powerful. It's definitely my favorite, and it's to create pauses. In certain parts of the conversation, you'll need to create silences sometimes to raise the tension even more. The main difficulty for most men here is not getting nervous. When you use any of the techniques I've mentioned and create sexual tension, instead of switching directly to another topic, create a pause and look her in the eyes while smiling. You can also do it when she asks you a playful question. Before answering, create a pause where you also make eye contact while smiling. And keep looking at her until she starts to smile, turn red, or get nervous. That's when you can say to her, "Wow, I didn't know I intimidated you so much." Let's move on to technique number 5, which consists of misinterpreting her words and actions and framing them in a more sexual context, or assuming she's doing them to seduce you. If, for example, she has a lot of physical contact with you, can't stop touching you, or asks you very personal questions, say something like, "Slow down, I'm not an easy guy." Also, if during the conversation she mentions words like wet or hard, misinterpret them and assume she's saying them to seduce you. If you've made it this far, now comes the bonus I promised you. It will drive her completely crazy and put her in a more sexual state. But what you have to be clear about is that you have to use this technique when you've already seduced her. When you're kissing for the first time, right in the middle of the kiss, pull back, moving away from her and look at her with a challenging gaze, always with a smile on your face. And before we get to the very important question I mentioned earlier that I'm going to ask, remember to subscribe and give it a like because soon there will be videos on psychological manipulation, dark psychology, dominant skills, red flags in women, words that play with their minds and make it easier to have sex with them, and much more. So subscribe. And now, let's get to the question. In this video, unlike the last two that were more serious, more like a theoretical essay, in this video, I wanted to bring a bit more personality, humor, and a bit more dynamism. Tell me which style you like more, which style you prefer, so I can take it into account for the upcoming videos. And subscribe if you want to take it to the next level and give the video a like. See you in the next video.